Most people that take them free are really gleaners. They take what's there. What it's going to come to, when the population improves, you've got to put it there before you can take it. And you have to do that with oysters now. My grandfather started in 1887. He had a rowboat and a pair of tongs and a rake, and that was about it. But now it's actually farming from the full sense of the word. You have to have your own seed, your own beds, and your own boats and equipment. It's really a technical farming industry, and very exciting and very lucrative if you can raise them. If somebody don't do it, you're not going to have food to eat. That's the simple clutch of the whole thing. You must produce, especially any product that's in scarcity. You must produce and create the crop yourself. That's what we're doing. We're creating our crop 100%, and they're going to have to do it if you want to have food in this world. This process we have it's what's going to be in the future.
What we do in the hatchery is to raise the oysters from fertilized eggs and culture them using scientific techniques to a stage of growth where they have a much better chance of surviving once we later plant them on the oyster beds in the bay. This is where the process begins. We use algal cultures to feed the larval, juvenile, and mature oysters here in the hatchery. We start off with starter cultures from Woods Hole Oceanographic or Milford Laboratories. We grow 5 different kinds of algae. We start off in the flask stage, which I have right here, and we use those flask cultures to inoculate 5-gallon bottle cultures with. The 5-gallon bottle cultures in turn are used to inoculate 3,000-gallon cultures, which we have on the next floor. These are our breeding oysters. We actually take large oysters from the bay, and through temperature and feeding control, we develop the oysters so that we can actually spawn them right here in the hatchery. This is the chart that we use to keep track of our larval oysters. These are the screens that we use to screen them with. A 24-hour-old oyster would be caught in this screen, which is 325 meshes in 1 inch. After a 2 to 3 week larval stage, they get up to this size, which is 80 meshes to the inch. The way we keep track of the numbers of the tanks outside is on the top line, and the side line is the United States Civ series in meshes per inch. So various different tanks would have various sizes of larvae. This is the area where the oyster larvae are raised. We take the fertilized eggs from the breeding oysters and we put them in the various size tanks. They would be in this area of the building for approximately 3 weeks.
Okay, after 2 or 3 weeks of the oysters swimming around, they lose their swimming organ. They have to attach these clam chips. Then 3 days later, they're taken out and put into trays and then put out on the rafts.
This is a stack of oysters that came out from the hatchery about 6 weeks ago. And from here, they go out into the floats, which are out there, and they come back in every 2 weeks. And these oysters are, when they're brought in, they're cleaned and sized as to what they are, depending on how fast they grew. Gets put into this sizing machine, which breaks it down into 3 different sizes, which we call 1s, 2s, and 3s. What Mike's doing now is pouring the number 3 tub from the machine into trays. As they're poured into trays, they're poured out just enough so the oysters cover the tray. From there, they're thinned out, they're spread out evenly onto each side of the tray. If there are too many, we do it according to how many we think should just grow in the tray that would be comfortably, so they won't overgrow, or the ones in the bottom won't grow. Now they get hosed off. After they get hosed off, they get stacked up. And these oysters right here are are 2 months old, which they started in the hatchery. And from here, they're going to go out to those floats. And the next time they're brought in, they're going to be planted on the bottom.
We're going to dig down on 63 into an oyster bed, dredge up a load of oysters, show you what the next year's crop's going to look like, which will be sold after January the 1st.
We check and monitor the beds. Our biggest problem in Oyster Bay is the starfish. Starfishes are the natural predators of oysters. It's like a hand in the cash register.
The starfish really are a marvelous animal. I admire them. The starfish will take a oyster or a clam, wrap his arms over the top of the clam, so seal it right up, and then I believe that he puts out an anesthetic, the oyster tastes, and it relaxes the muscle. And he'll take his stomach and put right in the shell and eat every speck of that oyster. Our predator bill is around $2,000 to $3,000 a week right now. So if I can find out how to save that $2,000 or $3,000, that's something we can all divide up. This will harvest the oysters we send to market. This is the finished product. After put in the bags, they're taken down to the dock at Oyster Bay, load down trucks, and sent into market. They're sizing the oysters, culling the oysters, separate the medium size to the big size and the shells. This is preparing for market. They'll be put in the bags and then take down to the dock, load down the dock, and then load down the truck and take to market. We're putting out probably 5 tons of food every other day. That's a lot of food. That's one of my boats going out. He's been up the creek harvesting oysters. Now he'll go down to Oyster Bay, finish out outside the bridge here as the tide change, go down to Oyster Bay and unload down there.
Well, this boat's just come in now off the grounds, and he'll get ready and prepare to unload the boat. At this time of the year, we got 2 boats that are harvesting, and we have 1 boat that's checking stars and taking care of all of the other incidentals that we have to have done, such as planting lime and so forth. This is our unloading point. This is where everything is shipped from. Even though we have the other plant over in Bayville, this is where we do all the shipping out of this dock. All of those sacks that you see on the pallets there, they'll come off, and then we pick them up with a forklift truck, take them around to the front to the loading pier, and then load them right into the truck. These oysters are approximately 3 years old, and they're just about the size that are delectable for a half-shell oysters and also for stews. Well, at this time, they'll be loaded on this truck and headed for Connecticut, where they get distributed, and most of them will probably end up in the Cape Cod area or up in Boston. And from Boston, some of the seafood houses up there will ship them on up to out of state. They can go out of state to other restaurants. I think that they'd be all consumed within a week.
Well, Butler Flower is one of the outstanding individuals I've ever met. He is an engineering genius. In other words, he can devise equipment that will move water, centrifuge water, clarify water, build dredges, and do fantastic things that other people just don't have the ability to do. He's also had a great deal of ability at financing, to keeping his structure alive during very hard times, and he has found outlets for his products, both the larva and the adult oysters. So from all points of view, Butler is just one of these tremendously outstanding individuals who has many, many talents, more talents than most people.
Well, we do everything. If we want a dredge of a certain size, we make it, or if we want anything at all, or if we want a boom or like that, we make it. Start right from the raw material. This boom right overhead I made. I don't do it so much anymore. I have men that do it for me, like Henry Flower. He's one of the head mechanic on that. Henry's making new dredges. I've worked on those dredges, I bet you 40 years, and we're only just starting to get them the way I like them. They're not perfect yet, but we do have a self-closing dredge, which is a big advantage. And I want to get one that I press a button and opens up and dumps the load out. We'll get it in time.
He was one of these people that would lay awake nights thinking about how he's going to improve a piece of machinery. And like I was saying before, a cloud of dust would come in the driveway, jump out of his car and start putting marks on a piece of wood or a plate or something where he could have it laid out sort of a pattern, and he'd build it. And most of the time it worked, some of the time it didn't. And he, in my estimation, even though he is my cousin, is a fantastic engineer. I don't think he graduated 8th grade, and it all came out of a book, the learning that he has. And anything that has been produced down here, machinery-wise, that float idea, you name it, it all came from him.
Well, the first boat was probably a small boat that I don't remember the name of. I do remember the Elsie Ruth, which was a sailboat, and then we had the Myrtle, and we had the Mayflower, which was a converted party boat. And the Mayflower was one we went to the market with on a very cold day, and my two brothers and myself were down there, and we got iced in on the way down between here and Matinicock Point, and just about that time a cloud came over and covered us up, and we headed for Connecticut for a shelter. My father was watching us from the beach, and he thought we had sunk. We didn't sink, but we did have a little experience. We went into market, and took 2 days to get the ice off before we got unloaded. By the time I got back, my father was up in the woods hunting for a tree to build the Ida May. He designed the boat completely out of his head. He had built boats with his father, and they never had any plans, just built the boat the way they wanted them, and it turned out to be a very nice boat. The Ida May, according to the Captain Richard, she's the queen of the fleet, and it's my opinion too.
I call it a queen of the fleet because it's Butler's pet boat, and I feel fortunate that he asked me to run it for him. Well, she's a shoal draft boat. She only draws 3.5 foot of water, so she's quite affected by the tides and the wind. And she doesn't have as much power as the other boats, so when both dredges are over, pulling along the bottom, it's difficult to steer, and rather than steering with the rudder, you learn to steer with the dredges. Butler's strongest characteristic, I would say, is his determination and persistence. Being of another generation than Butler, I've learned, the thing that I've learned from him is not to give up. That if you persist, you can overcome just about anything. And I think that's what has made him one of the most successful oystermen and one of the only oystermen left in the business. Well, Ida May was Frank M. Flower's wife, which was Butler's mother. And he named the boat after her. And he had other boats that he named after his children. The family history goes back into the beginning of the 1800s when they settled in Shoe Swamp on the North Shore of Long Island, and then moved to Mill Neck where they settled, started the oyster business at the homestead, and eventually moved to Bayville.
My folks moved down here from the shoe swamp in around 1870, 75, or 80, somewhere along in that area. It was 1887 when they used to come out here and shellfish, catch the oysters and clams, and scallops, and all different kinds of fish too. But, there's a lot of water under the bridge since that time. My sister still lives there. She has taken over the place and keeps it. When she dies, she's going to leave it to the family so the next generation can take it over. My grandfather's name, William Allen Flower. He was born in England, and he married a young lady by the name of Gardner, which was related to the Gardners down the east end of the island. And they disowned her because he was just a poor flower. And he moved over here. And I believe the first job he had was Renville Smith on a farm. Walked from Shoe Swamp to Oyster Bay and worked on the farm. And after the house burned down, they moved down here and started the oyster business. I don't know just when it was, but they just had a rowboat and tongs or a rake, and that was the starting of it. My wife lived in Glen Cove. And the churches used to get together with the Epworth League and different groups. And one time we went to Glen Cove. So I saw this red-haired girl and took kind of fancy to her and eventually married her. And we have lived together. I lost her a few months past. We have lived together for almost 57 years. We had a very happy life together. My personal qualities? Just being a human being, I guess. I don't know what you would call it. I do have I have no ability to write or to draw or anything like that. But if I want to make something, I can see it in my head very clearly. And I think that that's my difficulty, trying to explain to the men what I want. So I have to kind of be there and show them what's going on. No, I have no problem in seeing how things are going to work in my brain, but to put it on the paper, that's another story. I like to paint. I like to paint pictures. I did like to paint because now I'm getting a little too old. I'm no Grandma Moses. But the problem with the thing we want to solve with the greenhouse is to have seed. The conditions of the water have changed so that the seed didn't set, and if we didn't have set, you didn't have a business. And as you can see right now, there's very little set. You may get a set once in 5, 3, or maybe 8, or maybe 10 years, but you can't run a business that way. Originally, there was hundreds of big companies in Long Island Sound. At present, there are 3 of us left, simply because they couldn't get the seed. And what we decided, if we could make a success out of it, we could get whatever seed we needed for the business. And we have made a success out of it, thanks to the cooperation of the Cornell University, Rutgers University, and a lot of others that they've given us assistance, and we are really successful. We know how to handle oysters. We can do that, no problem. We don't know how to handle clams yet. We can raise them. We can raise scallops too, but we don't know how to set the clams. We put 100 million clams, which is a lot of clams if they was all adults, up here, and we never got a clam up. But eventually we'll learn more about them, but we can't do it yet because we're too busy with the oysters. This is the most fascinating thing that ever happened in my life. When you come up, you spend your whole life trying to find out different things, and you come across something like this and make it work. The boys make it work for you. Oh, I've gotten older. And I try to get a little more mellow. And I don't think I know it all. I try not to. When I retire, they're going to box me and bury me. I'm getting too much of a kick out of what's going on now. I spent all my life trying to learn how to do it, and I got the boys that are doing it. As I tell David and Joe, which are the brains in the greenhouse, There's going to be a day they're not going to raise an oyster over there. There's going to be a disease or a catastrophe or something that they won't be able to raise an oyster. But don't get discouraged. We got the equipment. We'll raise them next year. I think the whole world, all over the world, has got to get into the sea and raise more food in the sea. The possibilities are there, as we are demonstrating, and it's a necessary way the world's got to go. Not only in oysters and clams and scallops and mussels, it's got to go into all kinds of fish. See, that's going to be more difficult, but it's coming. And I hope that we'll spread the news that oysters can be raised under the conditions that we are raising them and make a success out of it.